2 months after baby Anne was born, something changed on the farm. Mother Loy noticed it first. She was folding laundry in the yard when she saw Tu Tien sitting by the window, sewing. Not unusual, Tu Tien was always mending something. But this time, she was working on something small, tiny, a yellow baby shirt, the kind newborns wear in their first weeks. Mother Loy walked closer. Tu Tien, what are you making? Tu Tien looked up, and her eyes were bright. Happy, a little scared. I wanted to wait, she said softly. To be sure. But... She held up the little yellow shirt. I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant. Mother Loy's hands went to her mouth. You're 3 months. The doctor confirmed it last week. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mother Loy sat down beside her and pulled her into a hug. Oh, my dear, this is wonderful. Yeah, car. Tu Tien laughed, wiping her eyes. I know. I didn't know how to tell everyone. With Lei and baby Anne here, I didn't want it to seem like I was taking attention away. Stop. Mother Loy held her shoulders firmly. This family has room for all the joy we can hold. You hear me? All of it. That evening, they told everyone at dinner. Jack nearly dropped his bowl when Tu Tien said the words. Le gasped and reached across the table to squeeze Tu Tien's hand. Mrs. Han, who had come for her weekly visit, started crying immediately. Even Le's mother, who still visited cautiously, like she was afraid she might break something fragile, smiled wider than anyone had seen before. 2 babies, Mrs. Han said, shaking her head in wonder. This farm is going to be full of life. Mother Loy looked around the table, at Jack, who couldn't stop grinning, at Tu Tien, glowing with quiet happiness, at Lei, holding baby Anne in one arm while reaching for more rice with the other, at her sister, who she'd barely spoken to for 20 years and now saw every week. This was what healing looked like. Not perfect, not without scars, but real, growing, alive. But here's what nobody expected. The next morning, Lei's mother showed up early, alone. She was carrying a large bag, and her face looked like she'd been awake all night. Tu Tien was in the garden when she arrived. Good morning, she called out. We weren't expecting you until... I need to talk to all of you, Lei's mother said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Please, it's important. They gathered in the kitchen. Jack, Tu Tien, Mother Loy, Lei with baby Anne. Lei's mother set the bag on the table and took a deep breath. Last night, after I got home, I couldn't sleep, she began. I kept thinking about what Mrs. Han said, about this farm being full of life, about 2 babies coming into this world. She looked at Le, and I realized I've been doing this wrong. Le frowned. Mom, what do you mean? I've been visiting, apologizing, trying to make up for what I did. But I've been going home every time, back to the village, back to the empty house where I kicked you out. Her voice cracked. And I can't do it anymore. She opened the bag. Inside were clothes, photos, a few books. I want to stay, she said quietly. Here, on the farm, if you'll have me. Oh. The kitchen went silent. Le stared at her mother. You want to live here? I know I don't deserve it. I know I hurt you, but you're my daughter, and Anne is my granddaughter. And now there's going to be another baby, and I. She stopped, wiping her eyes. I don't want to miss any more. I want to be here, really here, not just visiting on weekends. Mother Loy stood up slowly. Sister, she said. It was the first time she'd called her that in 2 decades. Are you sure? Lei's mother nodded. I talked to Mrs. Han. She said the village house is hers anyway. She said, she smiled through her tears. She said it's about time I stopped running from my mistakes and started living with the people I love. Lei looked at Tu Tien. Tu Tien looked at Jack. Jack looked at Mother Loy. Mother Loy walked around the table and stood in front of her sister. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. 20 years of silence, of pride, of wounds that had never quite healed. Then Mother Loy said, "We'll need to build another room." Lei's mother's face crumpled. "You mean your family?" Mother Loy said simply. "You've always been family. We just forgot for a while." And just like that, the farm got a little more crowded, a little louder, a little more whole. That afternoon, Jack started sketching plans for an extension to the house. Lei's mother unpacked her bag into the spare corner of Lei's room. "Just until Jack finishes building," she said. But everyone knew she was crying happy tears when she hung her clothes next to Lei's. Tu Tien watched it all from the doorway, her hand on her belly, and thought about how strange life was. 2 months ago, this farm had been just her and Jack. Now there were 7 people, soon to be 8, and somehow it didn't feel crowded. It felt like what home was supposed to feel like, but there was still something unfinished. That evening, after dinner, Mother Loy pulled her sister aside. They walked to the edge of the farm, where the vegetables grew in neat rows and the dogs dozed in the last bit of sunlight. "I need to tell you something," Mother Loy said. Her sister looked at her. "What is it?" "When I saw Le on that couch, pregnant and alone, I was so angry." Mother Loy's voice was quiet. "Not at her, at you. At myself. At all the years we wasted. I know. I'm sorry. Let me finish." Mother Loy took her hand. "I was angry, but then I realized something. We can't get those years back, but we can choose what happens now." She squeezed her sister's hand. "So I'm choosing this. I'm choosing to forgive you, and I'm asking you to forgive me." Lei's mother started crying. "There's nothing to forgive. You didn't." "I left. I moved to the city and never looked back. I let pride keep me away." Mother Loy's eyes were wet too. "So yes, there's plenty to forgive. And I'm asking you to do it anyway." They stood there in the fading light, 2 sisters who'd been strangers, holding on to each other like they might disappear if they let go. And when they walked back to the house, something had shifted. The weight they'd both been carrying, the weight of 20 years, was lighter. Not gone, but lighter. The next few weeks were chaos. Beautiful chaos. Jack and 2 workers from the village started building the new room. Lei's mother insisted on helping, even though she'd never held a hammer before. "I'm learning," she said stubbornly when Mother Loy tried to stop her. "I've spent too many years watching from the sidelines." Tu Tien's belly started to show. She moved slower now, careful with the heavy baskets. Le would rush over to help baby, Anne strapped to her back in a cloth carrier. "You helped me," Le would say. "Now it's my turn." Mrs. Han came every weekend with supplies, fabric, food, stories from the village. She'd sit with the women in the evenings, teaching them old songs while they sewed baby clothes. 2 cribs now, 2 sets of tiny shirts and blankets. The farm had a rhythm, a heartbeat. Morning harvests, afternoon meals, evening sewing circles. Jack would come home from the city, still working to rebuild the company, and find the kitchen full of women laughing, the dogs playing with baby Anne on the floor, the smell of soup and fresh bread everywhere. "This is what I always wanted," he told Tu Tien one night. "A full house. A real family." Tu Tien kissed him. "Me too." But Mother Loy noticed something. Lei's mother was trying too hard. She worked from sunrise to sunset. She volunteered for every task, no matter how small. She never sat down unless someone forced her to. She apologized constantly for taking up space, for eating too much, for breathing too loud. One afternoon, Mother Loy found her crying in the new room. The walls were up, but not painted yet. Lei's mother was sitting on the floor, her hands covering her face. "What's wrong?" Mother Loy asked gently. "I don't deserve this," Le's mother whispered. Any of this. I kicked my daughter out. I told her she'd brought shame on our family. And now I'm here, living in this beautiful place, with these beautiful people, and she shook her head. I don't know how to forgive myself. Mother Loy sat down beside her on the dusty floor. Can I tell you something? She said. When Jack was young, I made a terrible mistake. I trusted the wrong business partner, lost almost everything. I was so ashamed, I couldn't look my son in the eye for months. Le's mother looked up. I didn't know that. Most people don't. But Jack forgave me, not because I deserved it, because that's what love does. Mother Loy put her arm around her sister's shoulders. Le has forgiven you. I've forgiven you. The only person who hasn't forgiven you is you. But how do I do that? By being here, by showing up every day, by loving the people around you instead of punishing yourself. Mother Loy squeezed her shoulder. Guilt is easy. It lets us stay in the past. But healing? That requires us to live in the present. And that's much harder. Le's mother wiped her eyes. I'm so tired of feeling like this. Then stop. Choose today. Choose to believe you belong here. It wasn't magic. Le's mother didn't wake up the next day suddenly healed, but she started trying. When the urge to apologize came, she'd bite it back and just say thank you instead. When she felt like she was taking up too much space, she'd remember Mother Loy's words and sit down at the table anyway. Small steps, but steps forward. Then one morning, something happened. Tu Tien woke up feeling wrong. Not sick, exactly. Just off. She told Jack, who wanted to call the doctor immediately, but she shook her head. It's probably nothing. I'll rest today. But by afternoon, the wrongness had turned into pain. Sharp cramps that made her double over. She tried to hide it, didn't want to worry anyone, but Le saw. Jack, Le shouted. Something's wrong with Tu Tien. Everything moved fast after that. Jack called the doctor. Mother Loy helped Tu Tien to the bed. Le's mother took baby Anne outside so the house would be quiet. Mrs. Han, who happened to be visiting, boiled water and gathered clean towels like she'd done this 100 times before. The doctor arrived within an hour. She examined Tu Tien, asked questions, took her time. Finally, she looked up. The baby's fine, but you're working too hard. Your body is telling you to slow down. Tu Tien's eyes filled with tears. But the farm can wait, the doctor said firmly. Or someone else can handle it. You need to rest, complete rest, for at least 2 weeks. After the doctor left, Tu Tien lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Jack sat beside her, holding her hand. I can't just lie here for 2 weeks, she said. There's too much to do. We'll handle it, Jack said. But we'll handle it. And they did. Mother Loy took over the garden. Le's mother learned to cook Tu Tien's recipes, with Tu Tien shouting instructions from the bedroom. Le managed the harvesting with baby Anne on her back. Jack rearranged his work schedule to be home more. The farm didn't fall apart. If anything, it ran smoother. Because here's what Tu Tien finally understood. She didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. She had a family, a real one, and they wanted to help. On the 5th day of bed rest, Le's mother brought her lunch. Not Tu Tien's recipe, her own. I made this, she said shyly. It's what my mother used to make when I was pregnant with Le. It's supposed to be good for the baby. Tu Tien took a bite. It was delicious, warm and rich and full of care. Thank you, she said. And she meant it for more than just the soup. Le's mother smiled, a real smile. You're welcome. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Mother Loy and her sister sat outside under the stars. I think she's going to be okay, Mother Loy said. Tu Tien? All of them. Le Tu Tien. The babies, this whole beautiful mess we've built. Her sister laughed softly. It is a mess, isn't it? The best kind. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Les' mother said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." Mother Loy took her hand. "That's what sisters do." And in that moment, 20 years of distance finally, truly closed. 2 weeks later, Tu Tien was back on her feet, slower, more careful, but smiling. The doctor had given her permission to move around again, with strict instructions not to lift anything heavy. "I'll be your arms," Le said, grinning. "You tell me what to do. I'll do the heavy stuff." It worked perfectly. Tu Tien would point to baskets, and Le would carry them. Tu Tien would say which vegetables needed picking, and Le would harvest them. They worked together like they'd been doing it for years instead of months. The new room was almost finished. Jack had painted it a soft cream color, and Les' mother had sewn curtains for the window. It was small but cozy, perfect. "I still can't believe this is mine," Les' mother said one evening, standing in the doorway. "Ours," Mother Loy corrected. "Everything here is ours." And that's when it happened. Mrs. Han arrived on a Sunday, like always. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her car came another vehicle, and another, and another. Jack went to the gate. "Mrs. Han, what's going on?" The old woman smiled wider than the sun. "We brought help." Tal Blee. Out of the cars came women. Lots of them. Neighbours from the village, friends of Mrs. Han. Some of them Le recognized from childhood. Others were strangers. They carried bags of food, bolts of fabric, tools, and building supplies. One woman had a portable crib. Another brought a rocking chair. A third carried an enormous pot of soup. "We heard about the babies," one woman said. "Both of them. And we decided you shouldn't have to prepare alone." Tu Tien came out of the house, her hand on her belly, staring in disbelief. "But why?" An older woman stepped forward. She looked at Les' mother. "Because 20 years ago, when my daughter got sick, your mother came to my house every day for a month to help. She cooked, she cleaned, she sat with my girl when I had to work." She turned to Tu Tien. "Your mother-in-law did the same for my sister once. This family has been helping people for generations. It's time we helped back." Mother Loy's eyes filled with tears. She'd forgotten about that, about all the quiet kindnesses her family had done over the years. She'd thought leaving the village meant leaving all of that behind. But kindness doesn't forget. It comes back. Sometimes it takes 20 years, but it comes back. The women spread across the farm like a gentle storm. They organized everything. One group took over the kitchen, cooking enough food to last 2 weeks. Another group finished sewing the baby clothes, 2 complete sets now, one in yellow and one in soft green. A third group helped Jack put the finishing touches on the new room. Les' mother worked alongside them, and for the first time since arriving at the farm, she looked free. Not guilty, not ashamed, just free. By evening, the work was done. The kitchen was stocked. The baby clothes were folded and ready. The new room had a bed, a dresser, and those cream-colored curtains. The women gathered around the dinner table. There were too many to fit inside. So they ate in shifts, some in the kitchen, some in the yard. They talked and laughed and told stories about their own babies, their own struggles, their own healing. Mrs. Han stood up and raised her cup of tea. "To family," she said. "The one we're born into, and the one we choose." Everyone raised their cups. To family. As the women started to leave, one by one, each of them stopped to hug Tu Tien, then Le, then Mother Loy, then Le's mother. Quiet blessings. Gentle encouragement. "We're here if you need us." When the last car pulled away, the farm felt different. Bigger somehow, even though it was the same size. Like it had expanded to hold not just the people who lived there, but all the love that had been poured into it. Jack stood at the gate with Tu Tien, watching the taillights disappear. "I don't even know how to thank them," he said. "You don't have to," Mother Loy said, coming up behind them. "You just keep doing what you're doing. Keep helping people. Keep building this beautiful thing." She gestured to the farm. "That's how you say thank you." That night, they had their own small celebration. Just the family. Jack, Tu Tien, Mother Loy, Le with Baby Anne, Les' mother, and Mrs. Han, who had decided to stay the night. They sat around the table, the same one where Le had first eaten porridge 4 months ago, the same one where Les' mother had apologized, the same one where Tu Tien had announced her pregnancy. "I want to say something," Les' mother said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She took a deep breath. "When I came here 2 months ago, I thought I was coming to make amends, to fix what I broke. But I've realized you can't fix the past. You can only build something new." She looked at each person around the table. "And that's what we're doing. All of us. We're not fixing an old family. We're building a new one." Mother Loy nodded. "A better one. One where mistakes don't define us," Tu Tien added softly. Le smiled, rocking Baby Anne gently. "One where love is louder than shame." Jack raised his glass. "To building something new." They all raised their glasses. Tea, water, warm milk. It didn't matter what was in them. What mattered was the promise they were making. To show up. To forgive. To build. Together. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Tu Tien stood at the window of their bedroom, looking out at the farm. The moon was full and everything was silver and quiet. Jack came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her carefully, his hand resting on her belly. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I'm thinking about how different everything is. 4 months ago, it was just us. Now." She gestured to the house, full of sleeping people. "Now we're this. Do you regret it?" "Not for a second." She turned to face him. "I just hope we can hold it all together. 2 babies. All these people. What if we can't?" "We can," Jack said firmly. "Because we're not doing it alone. That's the whole point." He smiled. "We have 3 grandmothers, a cousin, and an entire village that showed up with soup and baby clothes. If we can't make it work with all that support, nobody can." Tu Tien laughed. 3 grandmothers. Baby Anne and our little one are going to be so spoiled." "Good, they should be." She leaned against him, and they stood there together, looking out at the farm that had become so much more than they'd ever imagined. Not just a place to grow vegetables and raise dogs, a place to grow people, to raise hope, to harvest second chances. And in 3 months, when Tu Tien's baby was born another girl, they would name her Mai, which means tomorrow the farm would be even fuller, even louder, even more alive. But tonight, in the quiet with everyone safe and sleeping under the same roof, it was enough to just be here, to be together, to know that whatever came next, they wouldn't face it alone. Because that's what family means. Not perfection, not the absence of mistakes, but the presence of people who stay, who show up, who choose love over and over again, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard.